Welcome to the 17th hour of the Camaraderie Rescue Mission Incorporated. That's TCRMI. It's the 24-hour fundraiser to bring awareness to our veterans who struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder and are losing hope. I'm D. Scott Smith, your live stream host for this hour. My father enlisted in the U.S. Army right after high school. His interest was in electronics. He was all set to become an instructor at one of the military tech schools. Then, as he said, the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, and we all got to go to Germany. My uncle was a U.S. Marine, and he did not return after his third tour in Vietnam. I enlisted in the Air Force, and following basic training, went to study the Korean language at the Presidio of Monterey in California. Then I was posted to Osan Air Base, where we collected radio intelligence on North Korea and essentially were spying on them. And that is my military background. Now, this event, which runs from 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday night all the way through to tonight, this 24-hour broadcast by a number of broadcasters, is to bring awareness of the programs that TCRMI has and the collaborations that have been made with organizations and how to help veterans gain hope while living with PTSD. If you'd like to donate, you can do so by going to the link in the ticker in the comments. And you can go to tinyurl.com/hope-for-vets. And you can also donate by check. And you can make your check out to Camaraderie Rescue Mission, Inc. and mail it to Greg Bicknell, USAF Chief Master Sergeant Retired. That's 1532 Cordgrass in Lakeland, Florida. Zip code 33813. So we appreciate all of your donations. Every dollar counts and changes lives. Now, anyone who donates in increments of $100, their name will be put into the 6-month Freedom Boat Club membership draw. That value is over $7,500. The winner will be drawn when 2,222 tickets are sold. Over the last 24 hours, or over these 24 hours, there's going to be a lot of live stream shows going on with supporters of our veterans sharing stories and the organizations that help make a difference in our veterans' lives. Now, let us know where you're tuning in from around the world. We appreciate you showing up today. TCRMI is a veteran organization that was founded by Mr. Greg Bicknell, who is a retired Air Force veteran after serving 29 years. Mr. Bicknell had brain surgery that did not go well, and the result was that he had to be medically discharged. In his journey, he realized that he needed help after having suicidal ideations, and after getting up the courage to ask for help, he was told to make an appointment. It lit a fire under Mr. Bicknell and was the driving force to start TCRMI so that no one else would have to endure being put on a waiting list once they decided to reach out for help. TCRMI exists to vitalize and enrich the mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional health of active military, veterans, first responders, and the communities they serve. Dorothy Odell and her friend Tim Sohn decided to come alongside TCRMI due to her love of helping her veteran family and knowing that 28 veterans die by suicide each day. So let me repeat that number. Every day, 28 veterans die by suicide. This is something that must change. She had Mr. Bicknell on her Monday night show, Unstoppable Overcomers, on January 31st of 2022. It was episode number 44, if you want to check it out on her YouTube channel, Unstoppable Overcomers. Dorothy and Tim have done other 24-hour live stream fundraisers for cancer, so they thought, why not do something and gather others who care and help our veterans? So here we are. Dorothy Odell and Kimberly Genovese are on fire to help TCRMI grow and help save veterans' lives. So that's why we're all here today, to show up to change lives. Dorothy Odell and Kimberly Genovese also serve on the board of TCRMI and are here to make a difference. There are hundreds of veterans and first responders struggling with hope and feeling lost. Each person's story is different. Each person is impacted in a different way, as we have discovered on Unstoppable Overcomers. TCRMI is always hard at work with its many programs, including Just Coffee and Camaraderie. Now, I'd like to introduce you to my guests on the show today on this hour, the 17th hour, Jared Bonville and Tony Chapin, who have participated in TCRMI retreats. So with that, let's get started. And here we are. We are live. We've got Tony, Jared, and Valerie joining us here. Valerie is in Tampa, correct, Valerie? Yeah, there you go. Just a little bit still there, Valerie. You can go ahead and.
Can you hear me?
Live. You are live. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm very honored to be here today and share a little bit about Action Zone. I am retired Army First Sergeant Valerie Ellis Lavin. After retiring from the Army in 2014, I've become an entrepreneur. I have my own company, Luminary Global, where my husband and I run that together. We sell emergency trauma kits, prepper items, and tactical gear. I'm also co-founder of Action Zone. It is an entrepreneur service organization where we help veterans and their family members find economic success post-service through entrepreneurship, helping them realize their dreams to be small business owners. And I think that our mission works really well with what Craig is trying to do. Sometimes when service members have challenges with PTS, having their own business, building and growing it themselves without the distractions of corporate America, it lends to economic success, as I had mentioned. We have several programs within our organization to help meet the entrepreneur where they're at, from ideation to scaling and exiting. We are based here in Florida. We have in-person cohorts as well as virtual cohorts. So no matter what corner of the state that they reside, we can support them.
Valerie, that's wonderful. I'm always a big fan of people starting their own business. And I've been doing that myself for about 10 years. It's funny because people say, how can you take the stress, the uncertainty of working for yourself? But the way I always say it is that if you are working for someone else, it's like being an independent contractor, but you only have one customer. And so your income becomes binary. So thank you for all of the work that you're doing there in Tampa and across the state of Florida.
Thank you for letting me share it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got the, I'm going to put this back up again here. So this is the website, actionzonetampa.com. So people can go there and learn about the programs and enroll there. So very cool. Yeah. Well, I'll just introduce you to Jared and Tony. So we've got Jared in Kentucky, Tony in Ohio. I'm here in Oregon. Valerie, you're there in Florida. So we go coast to coast. This is the 17th hour of this important fundraiser for TCRMI. So we're grateful for everyone's work.
Thank you so much. And I'm actually on podium this morning teaching, so I'm going to go back to the class.
All right.
Thank you for letting me share our mission with your audience.
Absolutely. Have a great day, and thanks for the work.
Take care. Bye.
Take care, Valerie.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, good morning.
Good morning,
and welcome to the 17th hour. So let's, Jared, let's start with you. Let's have you introduce yourself, tell people where you are, your background, and we'll just get right into it.
Sounds good. I appreciate it, Scott. So I'm retired Master Sergeant Jared Bonville. United States Air Force. First half of my career, I was a aircraft armament systems guy working on the B-2 and the F-16 weapon systems. And then I decided to become an OSI agent, which if anybody watches NCIS on TV, it's kind of like Gibbs and what he does. Um, and that was changed some things. So I was retired at about just under 18 years from the Air Force. And at that time, I was 230 pounds on a cane, on about 14 meds, drinking half a gallon of wild turkey every 2 days. And that was just to sleep. I wasn't, trying to be a drunk and an alcoholic. I just needed to decompress or figure out what was in my head. So I was a mess. Went through the Air Force Wounded Warrior program about 2013, 2014. And this kind of goes a lot with what Greg has created with TCRMI, the Camaraderie Rescue Mission. Is just a few months ago, a friend of mine says, "Hey, we got a Air Force mentor thing going on Zoom. You mind jumping on there?" And I hadn't been with that program probably a year or so, and popped up, and Greg's on there. I'm like, I'll be, man. Good meeting you. And he was right from where I kind of grew up down in Florida. And there was some issues going on that I needed some help with, some other folks needing help with. And it was like the perfect timing to meet Greg and get involved with what he's doing there in Tampa. Because, typically if you need help, it's a lot of work. And I literally called Greg and I'm like, hey man, what do you think about this? And within 10 minutes, we had like 4 or 5 different options that wouldn't cost anybody anything. And I'm like, that's the military I remember. Folks helping each other out, building this back up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the quick and dirty of it.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. So, Tony, good morning. Nice to meet you.
Good morning.
And let's hear what's going on in your world and your background a little bit there.
So I'm also an Air Force veteran. Started off at I enlisted in 1987. Wound up going through electronic warfare systems training, working on the bomber aircraft B-52s there in Fort Worth, Texas, and that's where I met Chief Bicknell. Greg and I we worked on the same flight line, sat in the same truck for many hours, and got to know each other fairly well there. Life, moves on. I separated in '96 and got to know Greg a little while later through Facebook. He reached out and we reconnected and went out for his retirement ceremony with a couple of the other guys that served together at that time. Kept in touch with him on and off, and just got out and continued my career in aviation. And it's I don't know. It's just good to know that veterans that we, and through social media even, have been able to reconnect with some of the guys that we've served with together and reach out and make new connections and find new resources to help us through some of our issues that we're dealing with, whether it's personal issues or stuff dealing with the VA and things like that. So I really believe in the Camaraderie Rescue Mission and what it stands for and what it offers.
Yeah, this is great. I love having you guys here, and I was in the Air Force as well, so we got 3 wing nuts on one screen. So there you go. You never know what's going to happen. I always thought that the Air Force was the great way to go because the Army, the Army's the Army, and the Marines are the Marines, and the Navy is when you get off work, where do you go? So. Anyway.
And then we all talk trash about the Coast Guard, so it's all good.
Absolutely. So, so you guys have been involved with the Camaraderie Rescue mission for basically since the beginning. Is that mostly true?
I just jumped in probably about 6 months ago.
Oh, okay. All right.
But I mean, it's really akin to everything that a lot of us have been trying to do. Connect with each other, do things together, and just build each other up instead of getting knocked down. I think we can all agree that society has changed a bit, and what we were taught in the military, what really matters is your brother or sister to your left and right.
Mm-hmm.
And if all of you believe that, you all move forward. One of the big things that I always say is always forward. Doesn't matter how many times you fall down, but we have to go forward. I was in some pretty dark places, and I've helped a lot of vets get out of some pretty dark places.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's a perspective that's necessary. All three of us have gone through certain trainings that other folks would have no perspective about. A lot of folks can't even comprehend putting their lives in somebody else's hands. And we did that on a daily. That was a Tuesday for us. No big deal.
I remember back. So I joined in the early 80s, and so it was there wasn't much conflict going on around, right? So which made my mother happy, but there were things that I did not tell her about life over in Korea. So we worked on top of it was like Hill 51 was where we were at, and one side of that hill, and we were right near the flight line. So one side of that hill was hollowed out, and that was the fuel dump, right? That's where they kept all the jet fuel. And the other side of the hill was where they kept the ammunition. So it was hollowed out in the ammunition. Now, the funny thing is that, we dealt with a lot of classified information. So we would go through these drills. If we got overrun from North Korea, how we would destroy all of the classified information. Yep. Well, one stray shell sitting on top of the fuel and ammunition, we didn't need to worry about destroying the classified.
I was actually Kunsan for a while. So
okay, yeah, it is a different world. You do deal with things, and it is truly life and death in many cases every day. Tony?
Yeah, that's 100% correct. The common background myself and Greg had, like I said, we worked on the flight line, and Jared, I'm sure you understand there being munitions. You worked around a lot of heavy equipment. You had to trust your team had a specific job to do every day, and you had to have that routine. You had to click together with your teammates. Everybody knew what their job was and how to do it. You relied on them to do their job. They relied on you to do your job. And there's a lot of jobs out in the civilian world that have similar requirements for the teamwork like that. But then you also add in there the extra burdens of being in the military. It's not a 9-to-5 job. It goes on after you turn your toolbox in and you go home for a day. Well, now you're going back to a barracks where you still have a lot of stuff hanging over your head there. Scott, to touch on some of the things that you were talking about. We have shared experiences that we weren't ever really allowed to share with our families. You couldn't write home to mom and tell her, exactly how your day went. Mm-hmm. You couldn't talk about how your day went. And then the added pressure of having, all those North Koreans on the wall looking over at you, wanting to do bodily damage to you. It's not a shared experience that most civilians have. First responders can have some similar experiences to that, but the military, regardless of what branch you were in, you signed up to lay your life down and potentially put yourself into harm, and you trained to a certain extent to run into the burning building or to run into the hazard instead of running away from it. And those are stresses that a lot of people don't understand, and it's important that as veterans that we are able to reach out to each other. We have that shared community. We have that shared background that we can relate. So Yeah, it can be very stressful.
Speaking of that, the shared situations, I kind of wanted to bring up a situation I was faced with last year. I ran the Northern Kentucky Veterans Treatment Court, which is 3 counties worth of um, court systems that help veterans who have been involved. And most of the time, it's with substance abuse issues. And there was this one veteran that went to a court, and he tells the judge, I've got PTSD. It's classified. I can't talk about it. And this dude is visibly shaken, bothered, uncomfortable. And the judge didn't know much about it. He's like, well, I can't help you. Maybe you need to go to a mental health court. So he goes to a mental health court, and he tells that lady the same thing. And she knows me and what I did for a living. And I sit this guy down. And again, he's visibly shaken, nervous, doesn't really trust anybody. And I said, hey, man, who are you with? And he tells me the task force number. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I know them. I worked with them in Iraq and Afghanistan, did this, this, and this.
Mm.
And his eyes just bugged out. He's like, you know about them? I'm like, yeah. Like, do you remember your readouts and things like that? He's like, yeah, that's why I can't talk about it. I said, okay, let me give you some information. Since he had gotten out, he had never gotten any assistance for mental health at all because of what that, being read out of that classified program told him.
Mm-hmm.
And within about 5 minutes, I told him what, hey, remove certain details, time, place, named operations, things like that. And then go talk to a shrink, like talk to a psychologist, whatever you want. Talk to a priest. I was like, but take that stuff out, but you still need to talk about it. Talk to somebody that can get you help. As soon as I told him that, you could see the relief come over him. And within about a month, I hear back from him, doing good in treatment. The judge took care of the issues that he had, can move right on. It just took one person to explain to him how to adjust something, and he could get the help he needed.
Jared, that's a beautiful story. I'm going to put this back up so people can see. This is the Unstoppable Camaraderie 24-hour fundraiser for heroes, badges, and warriors. And we are looking to raise money for the Camaraderie Rescue Mission. And people can give by going to tinyurl.com/hope for vets. And there's also an address where you can mail a check. For those people who actually still have checks, I don't actually have any checks from my bank account. I don't know how I would write a check to somebody, but I suppose I could go get one if I needed. But it is important. We need each other. As humans, we are created to need each other. And those who have been through trauma, whatever that is, and the military and first responders, that's their life. They sign up to get in front of trauma and protect the rest of the folks. And I'll tell you, there is hardly any movie that's going to make any money that doesn't follow that storyline, where you've got the hero who's going to jump in front of that bullet to save that child.
It's difficult in society now too, because a lot of the media that we see is very negative. You don't see that positivity about people stepping in front of the danger to protect other people as much as you hear the negative side of things. And that takes its toll on folks that actually have, sacrificed for other people. Because is it worth it? That type of thinking makes life difficult. So by us coming back together and helping each other and lifting each other up, moving forward, I think there's less of a negative issue with that other crap that's going on.
Yeah.
Well, I also think it's very important to provide outlets, positive, beneficial outlets. People need to vent. Whether you're still active in the military or still an active responder, or you've relaxed back into your civilian life, there's still pressures there. There's still my family history is also one of service. My father was Air Force. Uncles were Air Force. We've got uncles that were Marines. But one of my uncles in particular, he was a security specialist. He was a security cop for the Air Force. And when he deployed over in Vietnam, and then some of the stuff he saw over there, he still couldn't talk about later on, and it affected him. He internalized a lot of that, and even in his civilian life, he was a minister and he was an educator, but he still felt like he didn't have anybody he could talk to about a lot of those things, and it affected him, later into his life. And then he finally was able to get some veterans outreach and able to, get over some of that and deal with some of that trauma that he experienced as a young adult, as a young man. And I think it's one of the benefits of the camaraderie rescue mission was the retreats that they offer, the outings that Greg's able to put together for us veterans. To you come together, you meet new people, you spend some time with them, you get to learn a little bit about them, they learn a little bit about you, and Greg is able to facilitate some healing sessions, and that was a great experience. It was about a year ago, last year, when we did it there in Brea, Kentucky, where he put together a small retreat, and we were able to sit together and do that, and we spent about a week there at one of the cabins they had out there, and that was just a really excellent opportunity. And it's the donations that we receive through outreaches like this, what facilitates that, what makes that possible.
Yeah, those. Let's talk a little bit about some of those programs. So this retreat, just a chance to get out, to be with folks that understand, and as you said, to be able to just share. And Jared, as you were talking about too, is being able to just talk about it. And it's amazing the healing power that can happen when you have that opportunity to talk to somebody who not only listens but can understand.
Yeah. And the whole big strong guy whole mentality, just take. Sometimes when you get in a group and it's a good cry ain't that bad. There are releases that your body needs to go through. And it's kind of like you were talking about, Mr. Chapin, is your uncle that was in Vietnam became a chaplain, still never talked about certain things. Like, we don't want our loved ones to be exposed to the things that we were exposed to. And even as in law enforcement, my dad was a cop, or my stepdad was a cop, and I was in law enforcement for a long time. So seeing the differences between military and law enforcement really wasn't that different in a lot of ways. You got to think, a military guy, sometimes they'll deploy a couple times a year, maybe once a year, depends what service. And they're seeing traumas for, anywhere between 3 to 6 months to a year. And then they get a break, come back, deal with real life, and then go back to the war. Cops and firefighters, man, they deal with it every single day. And I think a lot of people in the United States live in a little bubble when they think about evil and the bad things that happen. All this just trauma that people are exposed to that they shouldn't be exposed to. When we go to Iraq and Afghanistan and we see those things happen over there, we're like, okay, it's not our country. We can accept that. And then things happen in our country and it's, wait a second, this just doesn't make sense. But the traumas that those cops, law enforcement, firefighters, military go through, it has an effect over and over and over. And I remember in, just 10 years ago, the outlook of, okay, something's not right and I need help, it wasn't publicized as much as it is now. It's, get back there and do what you need to do. I think if, we're getting to the right place where we're supporting each other, doing these programs, and actually having the conversation before something really bad happens to somebody. I mean, we've all lost folks to this war or suicide or bad health problems. I wish before I was medically retired, somebody would have actually set me down and say, hey, man, there's another way out of this. You don't need to drink yourself into oblivion every night. But nobody ever did that.
Yeah, I think fortunately, I believe that we've come a long way since the days of Vietnam, when our soldiers returned. Well, first of all, in many cases, society, the American public, did not welcome them home, and that was wrong to begin with. And then this strongman, right, feeling, right. Even if help was available, which not much was, it really wasn't the manly thing to do, if you want to say it that way.
Well, so let me
to ask for help.
Absolutely. But let me ask you a question. If you, as a I can't see your legs, but you have both your legs and both arms?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, as a human being with both legs and both arms, for me, that was one of my issues. I see guys that have lost legs, arms, their lives. They're the families that need help. Like, I'm whole, right?
Right.
Mentally, I was jacked, but I'm here. I'm alive. I don't need the help. Somebody else needs it.
Right. Yeah.
But even that, looking outwardly, you could be whole outwardly, but you still have the pain on the inside. Mm-hmm. And then going back to what Scott was saying, it's like there got to be that kind of stereotype in the 80s. You had the disgruntled veteran who was, because he internalized all this stuff. He didn't have somebody to talk to. He didn't have that support network, and then, whatever he lashes out or whatever. So you had that narrow, that negative, narrow stereotype of that person. And then, thankfully, I believe anyway that our service members are treated a bit differently nowadays. The veterans are treated differently, but still, there's also that stereotype that just because you appear whole that you're whole. Well, what have you got to worry about? Well, no, there's still an inner struggle, and I think that we need that outlet. We need to provide ears. We need to listen as well as be able to speak out. And that the suicide rate is atrocious. That's something that's the one I think that bothers me the most, is that there's the outward dangers of our occupations and the training and everything else that we went through, but then there's that unknown, and that's the suicide. People don't know how to reach out, or they're not aware of some of these programs that they can make use of.
Yeah. And that's why I'm glad that we're here today. And so we are looking to raise money for the Camaraderie Rescue Mission. And people can give by going to tinyurl.com/hope-for-vets. You can also mail a check if that works for you. These programs are available for any veteran or first responder. And Tony, I think as you said, you were there with Greg on the flight line. What were those discussions like that kind of led up to the rescue mission?
Well, the discussions that we had at then in that environment, really a lot of those discussions aren't appropriate for polite society. Really, and that was part of the camaraderie you built up, and I'm sure Jared and Scott, you both relate to that. Is that you were able to be yourself around these people that you had to hold back, a lot of other items from other family or other friends, because they didn't relate to what was going on at that particular time. Just the discussions I've had with Greg, over the past couple of years, like since he's been out and when we reconnected, was just his experiences sparked a passion in him to make sure that other people didn't have to hit that wall of bureaucracy of saying, oh, you have this wrong, well, then make an appointment. Well, no, why should I have to make an appointment if I'm in pain now? And it's just the realization that it's more than just physical pain. Physical pain is one thing, but the mental anguish that some people, their experiences have led them up to, having a brain surgery, for whatever reason he had the surgery. I'm not in the details on that, but it changed him. It changed him as a person, and now he had these thoughts and feelings that he couldn't relate to, didn't know where, how to deal with them, and to be told you have to wait for help on this. And I think that's one of the things that really sparked his desire to get this foundation, this rescue mission going. And I told him at that point that, whatever he needs from me, give me a call, and if I can make it happen, I'll make it happen. So that's been my involvement with it.
That's great. And Jared, how did you learn about the rescue mission?
It was just a random guy with the Air Force Wounded Warrior program, Clifton Flint. He actually messaged me one day. He's like, "Hey man, jump on this Zoom call," and he had talked to Greg at the same time, and neither me nor Greg had planned to be on this Zoom call, and we both linked up instantly. And like I said, I needed some help for a family down in Florida, and like within 10 minutes, man, we had an answer, and I was just floored. And just this last week, I'm talking to Greg, and I'm like, "Hey man, I want to do something in December, write about this with these people." I was like, "What can we do?" And he's like, "Give me a few minutes." Within like 20 minutes, he's got the venue booked and a plan. And I'm like, "Cool, I'll book my tickets, man." Like,
oh, that's great.
So, it's not just the veterans and the servicemen or the first responders, it's their family as well. And that gets left out a lot. Like and this is a perspective I know a lot of mothers will see. When I left home, I was comfortable. I knew exactly what I was doing. And when I went to a war zone, I was cool with it. I was there. I knew what I had to do. But my mom back home has no idea. I just tell her, don't watch the news. I'll be home. But her son's in the middle of a war zone. Like, she's freaking out, right? She's seeing what the news is. And that's not just my mother. That's every mother of somebody that went overseas. It bothers them. And then that's traumatic to them. So when we come back, they're very thankful. But again, they've been on this emotional roller coaster most of their life watching us. So we don't realize the trauma that we're putting them through by going out and doing this stuff. The Camaraderie Rescue Mission, it brings folks together so that we can have those discussions, we can heal a little bit, and we can get back with each other. And maybe the families can see that, hey, we're not so different after all. Like, it's these hurdles that are put in our paths that we have to work together with, and again, keep moving forward.
Those families have that feeling of helplessness, right?
Absolutely.
They just see the news, and maybe they can't even be in contact. They can't get a phone call or email, any kind of communication from their loved one that's deployed. I want to take a quick moment and say Tim Sohn is reminding us here that anyone who donates in increments of $100, their name's going to be put into the 6-month Freedom Boat Club membership draw of value over $7,500 with 3 exclamation points after that. So Tim's letting us know this is a big deal. And the winner will be drawn when 2,222 tickets are sold. So donate by going to tinyurl.com/hope for vets. I remember, Jared, being at the Greyhound bus station as I was getting ready to go off to the induction station, right? And 2 of my buddies were there with me. And I'm a typical 20-year-old boy at the time, right? Man. And we're joking around and having fun and talking about it. And my mother was there. And it was too much for her to watch her son going off
And joke about it.
Yeah, and joke about it. So she could not stay physically. She could not stay there until I walked onto that bus. She had to leave.
Yep. It's
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Tom.
No, I was just going to say my mother had the same reaction when they heard Dad drop me off at the Greyhound bus station. You know, I enlisted. It was 10 days after my 18th birthday, and I was the youngest. So the mama's baby was getting on the bus.
Mm-hmm.
So that she had the same reaction.
Yeah. It's getting back to that when Tim posted that 2,222 tickets are sold. It's akin to the 22 a day we've been hearing about for years, but recently we've heard that it popped up to 44 a day, and that's pretty sad. One of the nobody really wants to talk about the suicide rates, but again, this type of events that reduces those things when we get those folks out of those environments, that circular thinking in their head about there's nothing else here, permanent solutions to temporary problems, all those things. Part of my job when I was in OSI was investigating all the suicides, and it was very eye-opening, which was difficult for me because when I started having negative thoughts, then that became polar opposite parallels. Like I could never comprehend doing that to my family, but at the same time, why am I having these feelings? Like it's so negative. Mm-hmm. So I could finally put myself in their shoes and see the connections and the little differences that could have been made to get off of that path. And, when I'm investigating those suicides and deaths of our military members, the common thread amongst them all was they felt they had nobody that could help them get out of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they felt. I mean, that was completely inaccurate, but that's what they felt. So I always try to bring it up like, your feelings are your feelings, but a lot of times they're bullshit. You need to ignore them. Like they're, acknowledge them, but then if it's the wrong way, then you've got to adapt. You've got to overcome. Talk to your friends, talk to your buddies, talk to your coworkers, the brothers and sisters that we've developed over the years of our service. That one discussion can make all the difference in the world.
And, the military is serious about it as well. So after basic training, I went to language school. And one of the first things that they talked about was suicide watch and suicide prevention and watching out for each other, because there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of stress going on. And just to tell one more story, we were over in Korea, and, again, we're gathering all this radio intelligence from North Korea. And one day, the SR-71 Blackbird was flying up along the coast there, flies out of the Clark Air Base in the Philippines and was flying up the coast. And it was not unusual for the North Koreans to lock their surface-to-air missiles onto any aircraft that was out there. But I talked to the guys that were on the radios the day that the North Koreans actually hit the fire button. They launched a surface-to-air missile against that Blackbird as it was flying up. And, it's stressful enough to know that the guys that you're listening to have the ability to shoot down aircraft, and then be listening at the moment when they fire that thing off. That's something that you take with you forever. Now, the good news is that the SR-71 Blackbird flies at like 80,000 feet, 4.5 times the speed of sound. The weapons officer jammed the heck out of that. It was a radar-guided missile. Jammed the heck out of it, but they actually flew faster than that missile. And so eventually it ran out of fuel and just fell into the ocean and those officers were safe. But the guys on the radios that day, that was a moment, and those are the kinds of things where you don't find that in real life, if I want to say it that way.
No, and that's what, like, our perspective of the world is so different. You know, people worry about getting their pumpkin spice lattes. We're worried about a pilot getting shot down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the things that we were exposed to and the things that we experienced, I think we have such a stronger feeling of what's important and what makes, I don't know, humanity worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, it's those men and women, both in the military and first responders, first into the fray, right? And they're the ones that they're the shield. They're there to defend, and doing it willingly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that was part of you put your game face on every morning. You put it on when you put your boots on. You know, you knew. In this, like I said, even, supporting the aircraft, working as the aircraft maintainers, it was in the back of your head that every day you went to work, you might not come home. Stuff happens, and it was, accidents happen. You worked around heavy machinery, you worked around, big metal moving things and spinny things, and jet engines aren't very forgiving. Propellers are very unforgiving. As you work.
Yeah, don't get in front of the intake of one of those jets.
Exactly. But things that working in Strategic Air Command. When I was in the early late '80s, early '90s, we had the alert pads. The cops that secured the alert pads had an incredibly stressful job. It was, you always heard, the stories about, the guy, they couldn't take it anymore. But they went out there and they ate the bullet, and so it was, the stories were there, whether you were stateside or whether you were over in Korea. I was stationed there in Japan there for a while, supporting the intelligence operations down there. So I worked with a lot of the linguists and the Korean linguists and the Russian linguists and the Chinese linguists. Having to put that game face on every morning. Like I said, when you strapped your boots on, you put your game face on, you went in. It was expected that you had a positive attitude when you went to work, and you had to suppress, some of the feelings that you were having, because it was, you were just told, rub some dirt on it and get back in there. It's good to see that attitude has relaxed some, and that people are, have the ability to reach out and go, hey, boss, let's have a talk. I'm not having a great day. So some of the stigma, I think, has gone away from it. I think that was a very cultural important aspect there, is that we're allowed to relax a bit and say, hey, raise your hand. I need some help. So,
it's a fine line, though. It's a very fine line. I don't know if anybody saw the article about somebody getting upset about SEAL training when they were getting sprayed with OC and they had to sing Happy Birthday. The things that we endure in our training and in the mission sets that we have to do, we have to be able to get through them. So, anybody that's gone through SEER, there's a reason that you go through that. You don't want the first time you get exposed to enemy contact to be in the field. You want to kind of get an experience of what's going to happen if you get captured or in a very hostile environment and you have to survive on your own or something like that. Something very significant. It's not an easy practice to go through those training scenarios, but it's necessary. That's
they have to know where the weak link is. They have to know who's going to break.
Absolutely. Just like, being on an aircraft maintainer, if you've got a weapons load crew, you got 3 or 4 people loading a 5,000-pound bomb into the belly of this aircraft, that if one person does something wrong, everybody could be dead. But because of the processes and procedures we go through, we know we can accomplish it safely, fast, accurately, and go through it. But I don't know. It's so complicated. You know, the things that we need to do that kind of break us eventually, they're still necessary. But like Tony was saying, being able to take that break and actually talk about it, you know, and then you can get back in the fight again. Because if you can process that information instead of letting it build, then it's cool. You know, you can move on. You can understand it. Um, just makes it easier with the more knowledge you have.
Yeah, it was, and that's the important thing. Going back to like the training aspect of it is you have to induce those stresses in the training. Whether it was being in SAC, and we did the monthly training where you built up the aircraft to go to war, you loaded the bombs, you got the aircraft prepped and ready to go. That was part of that. That's why we did the training the way we did. And it was sometimes it was okay. So we were in the Air Force. It wasn't exactly SEAL training, or it wasn't Special Forces training, but it was still, I mean, we were training ourselves to provide the weapons to go kill nations. Nuclear bombs aren't, those aren't they're a deterrent for a reason, but, we were loading the actual weapons and everything else. And that was, that had to play part of your mind. Is that, okay, this airplane's going off to, although under the I'm not going to say the pretense, but under the mission of peace is our profession, we were enabling the pilots to go out there and wreak havoc and everything. And that weighed heavily on some people's minds. And some of those people, they couldn't handle that stress. But it was important that we, through the training and through the various processes that we went through, you were able to screen those people out. And, okay, now you need to go do something else. You can't do this job anymore. And sometimes there was a stigma to that. And there really shouldn't have been. But, that's just the way it was at the time.
I really think that's why I ended up being medically retired, because of the stigma associated with it. I mean, I'm officially a federal agent, gun-toting, badge-carrying guy, and I'm on 14 meds, drinking a half a gallon of whiskey. Like, whew, that ain't good. But mentally, also, I couldn't have gone and done something else. Like, I just wasn't in that mindset. I didn't know what the heck was going on. But again, now that the discussions are being had and people are coming together, I mean, 10, 12 years ago, did you ever think about a retreat for us in the military? I wouldn't have given it a second thought. But now it works.
Yeah, and like I said, the retreat that I went on with Greg, and give a shout out to the fellow vets that were on that retreat, Steve Glenning and Mike Parker and John France. Dude, we had a hoot. It was a good time. We were able to relax and unwind some things. Made some bracelets and a lot of little clay doodads, so we could sell those off on a fundraiser and other things. But it was, just the idea of, okay, I'm going to a retreat. Well, 10 years ago there was an image of going to a retreat that wasn't exactly like the most masculine thing in the world. But nowadays it's the culture, our culture has relaxed a bit. So it's not there's no stigma to it. You can say, yeah, I went to a retreat and I had a great time. It was awesome. Got to unwind and like I said, with Greg there especially, we have to relive some old memories. It was a good time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just that chance to get into a different environment, different physical environment, get away from the regular things that kind of distract you. From that time, we were able to get help, but also help others, because that's what happens when we have those conversations in that type of environment.
Exactly.
So we are here. Just remind everyone again, I'm going to put this back up so we can see Jared and Tony, our guests here, in the 17th hour of this 24-hour fundraiser for the Camaraderie Rescue Mission. And you can give, and we do want people to give. If you can give, anything that you can give is going to make a difference. And there's veterans, there's first responders, people that in your life please make that donation now. And I'm also going to say, coming up right after this, Ingrid Van Roy is going to be doing the 18th hour. And so people want to tune in for that as well. You know, Tony, you're talking about the nuclear weapons. And my cousin, he joined the Air Force just a few months after I did. He ended up staying in for his full 20 years and retiring. One of the jobs that he was down at the Vandenberg Air Force Base, and they had Titan II missiles, and they fired the last of those off, and then they went to Minuteman missiles. And his job was arming the destruct device on that. And so that means that if they fired off one of those missiles and it went off target and was going to go awry, they could push the button and blow that thing up. So not only is he hanging out next to a nuclear bomb, but he's also creating a little bomb to blow up the big bomb. So there's a lot of stress that goes on. These are jobs that have to be done every day.
I was 18 years old working on the B-2 bomber, and they're teaching me how to destroy a nuclear missile or a nuclear bomb if something bad happens.
Wow.
And this is all classified back then, right? Back in the late 90s.
Yeah.
A couple months ago, I go out to New Mexico to the nuclear museum, and the same bomb that I used to load that was classified is now sitting out on the floor. And I go up to it and I hit the panel, and normally on the training shapes, there's no dials or anything in it. And I open it up and the dials are there. I'm like, that was even more classified. I'm talking to the lieutenant colonel retired guy that's running the place. And he's like, so you know about that? I'm like, yeah, man, this is what I used to do. He's like, well, I used to fly them. He was a pilot and I was a loader. It was, but it was 30 years later. And now this thing's on display. And I'm like, wow, but you don't think when you're 18 years old and you're sitting on or working on a nuclear bomb that's real. Like this isn't TV anymore. You're literally next to a nuke. You're like, it's a whole different perspective of what's important in the world,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's it is hard to imagine. One more story, and this was a man that I worked with for years. He was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, so he spent a year there. And back in the day, he was taking pictures, slides. He was using a slide film. So he would he was married, so his wife was back in the Bay Area in California. He would take the film and drop it into these Kodak mailers and send it off, and then it would get developed, and then those slides would be sent to his wife in Mountain View, California, and she would load them into carousels. So during the year that he spent in Vietnam, he took over 10,000 slides.
Wow.
And he's got them all stacked up in these carousels. And all of these years later, so he left Vietnam in, I think, 1969. To this day, he has not looked at even one of those 10,000 frames that he took.
I get it.
Well, he lived it. He's probably still replaying a lot of those scenes in his mind.
They don't go away. And that's, I had somebody ask me a long time ago, and I've asked myself the same question several times during my processes. Can it be cured? And I really don't believe PTS can be cured. I think it's adjusting perspectives and thought processes to manage it, because what happened doesn't change. Like, it doesn't go away. It's just being able to manage the fallout from it. Would I love to not have those thousands of images of really bad crap in my head? Absolutely. But those thousands of images of really bad crap mold me and guide me on how to treat people a little bit better and do the right thing. Like,
it shaped you. It's brought you to where you are right now. So yeah, and I think one of the things that one of my uncles was dealing with was be able to forgive himself.
Oh, absolutely.
All the things that he lived through, he was having survivor guilt. He said he had his buddies that didn't live through it, but he lived through it. And I think that carries on to a lot of the young men that are coming back from the Middle East today.
Well, we've run our hour. Tony, Jared, thank you for your service. Thank you for supporting the Camaraderie Rescue Mission. And up next, it is Ingrid Van Roy with Katie Walker in Alan Yeck. So you will want to tune into that as well. With that, we're going to sign off for here, but people can continue to donate tinyurl.com/hope for that. So thank you, gentlemen. I sure appreciate getting to know you guys.
Thank you for your service, Scott. Thank you for your service, Jared.
You all too.
Blessings to all. Blessings to all.
Much love.